Hello and welcome to another Fandom Friday, where a member of the Rogers Public Library staff tells you something they are a fan of. I'm Evan Day, a young adult librarian, and this week I'd like to talk about some of the books that I've read in October. The first book was The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. Now, this book was something I mentioned last month that I had started reading it, so now I'll mention that I finished it. I can see why it got the acclaim it did. 16-year-old Star Carter sees a friend killed by a police officer and has to face the prospect of speaking up, even though she is frightened, of the police, of gangs not wanting her to talk to the authorities, of how her friends at school from a different part of town will react. I won't go too far into the details beyond that. I don't want to be a spoiler, other than to say that there is an interesting and I think really touching family dynamic in Star's father, her mother, her brother, her uncle, who's also a police officer, her friends, including her boyfriend, who are from the school she goes to across town that is much richer and well off than where she came from. There's a lot of history, obviously, dealing with race, dealing with class and all, but I think it's a very, there's a lot of real characters in this book. It's not just a message, though there is definitely a message here for sure. Anyway, very good book. For older teens and adults, I would say absolutely good. The second book is actually two books, and comics at that. Scales and Scoundrels, books 1 and 2, written by Sebastian Grinner, also artwork by Galad, and lettering and art style by Jeff Powell. This team has produced two books here. They're available on Hoopla, and it's a collection of fantasy comics set in a world that has several familiar staples of the genre. Dwarves, dragons, honor-bound knights, scheming thieves are all here, but I think it does take them in very unique directions. We follow several characters. In fact, the first book is very much a traditional party adventure. Some craziness goes down in a town, in a tavern. The various characters meet up with each other and end up going on a quest. The central character, really, to the story is Luvander, who is a thief who has a very important secret. But there's also a prince who is looking for adventure before he has to take on the duties of his royal lineage. His shadow is kind of bodyguard that is completely dedicated to protecting him, even though you get the feeling she may not always like doing that. And we have our dwarf character, and she's looking for her brother, trying to find out what happened to him. And they all have their own purposes. They all have their own little path and journey. And throughout the books, we go on certain adventures and see stories with each of them. There are a lot of twists. I actually enjoy the artwork very much. And it's some very interesting world building that sort of gets developed as you go through the first two books. There might be a third and I believe final one coming out pretty soon. Not sure about that. But yeah, Scales and Scoundrels, books 1 and 2. Check it out, again, on Hoopla. Well, that's it for this week's Fandom Friday. Not too many books to talk about in October, but let us know what you've been reading in the past month. Anyway, I'm Evan Day, and I'll see you next week for another Fandom Friday.